Now, Karl Popper was an originator of the idea that science is falsifiability. Nonsense. I'll discuss a little bit in my take two. Unfortunately, I talked about this just a bit ago, and the video didn't save. It's freaking annoying when that happens. But here's some excerpts from Science as Falsification by Karl R. Popper. This is, I think, originally published in Conjectures and Refutations, 1963, as it says. I'll put a link to this and maybe put some quotes, excerpts in the description field. But this is a common misconception some people have about the nature of science, what it is. So here, first of all, he says, quote, I therefore decided to do what I have never done before, to give you a report on my own work in the philosophy of science since the autumn of 1919, when I first began to grapple with the problem, when should a theory be ranked as scientific? Or is there a criterion for the scientific character or status of a theory? Unquote. So that's what he's talking about. And quote, the problem which troubled me at the time was neither when is a theory true, nor when is a theory acceptable. My problem was different. I wished to distinguish between science and pseudoscience, knowing very well that science often errs and that pseudoscience may happen to stumble on the truth, unquote. So, quote, I knew, of course, the most widely accepted answer to my problem, that science is distinguished from pseudoscience by its empirical method, which is essentially inductive, proceeding from observation or experiment. But this did not satisfy me. On the contrary, I often formulated my problem as one of distinguishing between a genuinely empirical method and a non-empirical or even pseudo-empirical method. That is to say, a method which, although it appeals to observation and experiment, nevertheless does not come up to scientific standards. The latter method may be exemplified by astrology, with its stupendous mass of empirical evidence based on observation, on horoscopes and on biographies, unquote. And in this, he also talks about Marx's theory of history, Freud's psychoanalysis, Alfred Adler's individual psychology. Talks about those as non-scientific. And so he, having some bad influences, I'll discuss more in the future. Popper's philosophy, the school of philosophy he's in, the history behind that school, some of his views. But having some bad ideas about logic, philosophy, epistemology, induction, not knowing some things, and I think maybe not knowing the history of science well enough. I don't know how much I got to dig into that, how much he's into that, but clearly he's wrong regardless. So without some of that, he makes some like really unfortunate errors, and people kind of fall for some of it, not kind of. He says, quote, it was the summer of 1919 that I began to feel more and more dissatisfied with these three theories: the Marxist theory of history, psychoanalysis, and individual psychology. and I began to feel dubious about their claims to scientific status. My problem perhaps first took the simple form. What is wrong with Marxism, psychoanalysis, and individual psychology? Why are they so different from physical theories, from Newton's theory, and especially from the theory of relativity? Unquote. Quote, to make this contrast clear, I should explain that few of us at the time would have said that we believed in the truth of Einstein's theory of gravitation. This shows that it was not my doubting the truth of these three other theories which bothered me, but something else. Yet neither was it that I nearly felt mathematical physics to be more exact than sociological or psychological type of theory. Thus, what worried me was neither the problem of truth, at that stage at least, nor the problem of exactness or measurability. It was rather that I felt that these other three theories, though posing as science, had in fact more in common with primitive myths than with science, that they resemble astrology rather than astronomy. Unquote. And then he says, quote, the study of any of them, three, seemed to have the effect of an intellectual conversion or revelation. Open your eyes to a new hidden truth from those not yet initiated. Once your eyes were thus opened, you saw confirmed instances everywhere. The world was full of verifications of the theory. Whatever happened always confirmed it, unquote. Nonsense that shows that is not what a confirmation is. So here we have a misuse of a term that helps, undercut his argument. This stuff does not confirm it. If someone goes around lying, no matter how many times they lie, let's say something lies about you, that's a common thing we deal with in everyday life. People trying to misinform others, lie about you, tell you how you are or something. No matter how much people go around claiming that, it is false. It is not a confirmation. It is a continued lie. Belief versus confirmation is not the same. Confirm means shows it to be true, helps back it up, not an arbitrary claim. So that is not valid. Now, he goes down here in this excerpt to say, after discussing some of the theories and Einstein and some things, quote, these considerations led me in the winter of 1919 to 22 conclusions which I may now reformulate as follows. 1. It is easy to obtain confirmations or verifications for nearly every theory if we look for confirmations, unquote. False. Okay. And remember, you got to distinguish between theory as properly done in science. It's something that's been proven, not merely hypothesized. And what he's claiming here, theory just means some collection of ideas, no matter what, astrology, astronomy, a theory that fairies rule everything or whatever. It is not easy to obtain confirmations. Lying, arbitrary associations are not confirmations. False. And he's doing that with the concept evidence too. Was it earlier when he, or later when he misused that, claiming that there was some evidence for some things? Let me see. In this thing, I think it was at the end of one paragraph, maybe I'll have to put a link or put a quote in the description field. I'd seen that earlier, but is it here? Nope. Or maybe it's in these like 1 through 6 things that I'm starting to read. But evidence is not anything one claims to be evidence for something. One can lie. Something is not evidence for a lie, it's just a lie. So he's misusing or equivocating or whatever on evidence 2. That's back when he was talking about, I think, astrology, when he claimed it had evidence to it. Astrology, Marx, oh well. Sorry. But confirmation, corroboration, evidence is something what it is. That concept is a certain concept, not whatever we want it to be. If something's a lie, you're not confirming it. You're just lying and claiming there's a relationship between something and what you're claiming. There's not necessarily a relationship just because one arbitrarily claims there is. So it's not easy to obtain confirmations. It's easy to arbitrarily make something up. And that's one thing that would distinguish science from non-science. Whether there's actually a logical, causal connection between things or not. If he'd stop and think, that's what he'd do. So, quote 2, confirmation should count only if they are the result of risky predictions. That is to say, if unenlightened by the theory in question, we should have expected an event which was incompatible with the theory, an event which would have refuted the theory, unquote. So, and that's a bunch of nonsense because confirmation counts in total. It's the totality of the evidence that counts, not just that we want. And while some of that is like cool and seems significant, it is not that alone which matters. That is not what should count. Things that something predicts that we wouldn't expect, no, it's the totality, and it should be integrated into everything we know. So totally false. But here he's saying, so for example, if an event incompatible with the theory, let's say the heliocentric theory requires that the Earth be rotating. And a lot of people think they know that, but they don't. They just memorize the words. It's learning in that sense. If you really dig into things, a lot of people don't actually understand that, unfortunately. Not out of stupidity or anything, but just the way it's like taught and not developed scientifically enough. But ancient people would not think the Earth is rotating. But to explain night and day in the heliocentric theory with the sun at the center, heliocentrism, sun, center, for the sun to be at the center and the Earth to go around, the Earth would need to rotate to make night and day. And without the total amassing of evidence and argument and reasoning that went into the heliocentric theory, one would not think that the Earth is rotating like that. Because why don't we fly off? From our experience, if you're on a Ferris wheel, something turning, if you don't hold on tight, you fly off. If people are on a horse or on a chariot and it's going and it turns real fast, they fly off. So if the Earth is turning, we'd fly off. You need more of an explanation to know that the heliocentric theory is true. So that's kind of what he's talking about. But no, that is not the only thing that should count. It's the totality of the evidence. We also have to know that when ships go away, they get smaller and the bottom disappears before the top. Things like that. They don't. If it was flat, they would get smaller and you'd see the whole thing. But you don't. They get smaller and you don't see the bottom, and then you don't see the middle, but you see the mass and the sails, and then the whole thing goes away. Things like that. The totality of the evidence matters. Wrong. 3, quote, 3, every good scientific theory is a prohibition. It forbids certain things to happen. The more a theory forbids, the better it is, unquote. False. What nonsense. The more it forbids? No. When it's connected to the truth, that's what makes a good theory. The more it explains and is connected to. This is so utterly false. He's so lost in his head. Ideas be connected to reality. We don't have ideas connected to other ideas. The purpose of a good scientific theory is not to keep us from like making a bunch of crap up. It's to know how the world works. False. 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 It's not a matter of prohibiting or forbidding. The more it forbids, the better it is. No. The more connected to reality it is, it's true. There's no better or worse. It's just, is it true or not? I don't care how much it forbids. I just care if it's true. So the more a theory forbids, the better it is. Okay, nothing exists. Forbid everything. So is that a good theory? No, that's nonsense. That is not scientific. That is not what a good theory is. A theory is an explanation. The more it explains what it should in its context, the better it is. And the more it's logically justified, built up from the evidence of the senses, the better it is. Things like that. Atomic theory is good because it can explain heat. It can explain electricity, things like that. It can explain chemical reactions. It can explain molecular structure. It can explain things about gases and how gases react and how other things react and how crystals are. The thing is, it explains the things it should. That's what makes it a good theory. If the atomic theory could explain the law of multiple proportions, law of combining volumes, or whatever exactly the name is, whereas it couldn't explain electricity or heat transfer, bad theory. It's not doing what it should. Okay, quote, a theory which is not refutable by any conceivable event is non-scientific. Irrefutability is not a virtue of a theory, as people often think, but a vice, unquote. Nonsense. Like any conceivable event. Conceivable. Make something up. No. What matters for a theory is the evidence of the senses in reality and what we know. It's got to be consistent with that and confirmed by it. It's not a matter of being able to make up some arbitrary crap in your head that could possibly refute it. That's a bunch of nonsense. That's a waste of time. Like, who the hell actually does that? No one. In math, do you do that? Do you go around making crap up? Oh, I want to know if this is actually scientific and actually part of math. So what kind of crap can I make up that might refute this? Nonsense. You prove something true. Period. End of story. That's what makes it part of math and scientific. It can be derived. It's connected to other things we know. You derive that one thing, you connect it to other parts of math. It's true. It's something that can be used in physics and chemistry. It's true. So, no. Quote 5. Every genuine test of a theory is an attempt to falsify it or refute it. Testability is falsifiability, but there are degrees of testability. Some theories are more testable, more exposed to refutation than others. They take, as it were, greater risk. Unquote. Nonsense. So, while this isn't a theory, let's think about this and concretize it. Again, in math, if we're trying to prove something to test it, you don't falsify it. It's a bunch of nonsense. Or when we're doing some experiments, we're not trying to falsify something. We're trying to find out how things work. Like getting a pendulum and changing the length to see how it affects the period. When Galileo did that, he wasn't falsifying it. Bunch of nonsense, you know? Although it's not a theory, that's not the cognitive or psychological process going on. No one ever does that. When you're testing something, you're trying to see if it's true. And yes, of course, you want to make sure it's not false. But that is not the essence of what you're doing. The essence is it connected to reality? That's what makes something science. Is it truth? Not, can I possibly make something up and see if it's not true? No one ever does that. We don't get to the moon by building a possibility to be false on a possibility to be false on a possibility to be false. We don't have a cell phone built on a possibility to be false on a possibility to be false on a possibility to be false and so on. Nonsense. Or have a car with an internal combustion engine that is built on things that are true and have been confirmed, not, oh, we're not sure yet, it might be false. Can we conceive of something? No. But when people came up with the heliocentric theory, the atomic theory, they're trying to see if it's true, not merely like falsify it. And even when we make some stuff up, this is a bunch of nonsense. In science, you don't just make up any arbitrary claim and try to falsify it. That would be so unproductive. Where do you even stop? There's no barrier, boundary or anything on that. Unhelpful. In science, you look at what things are, get something sensible and plausible and real in that context and try to see if it's true. You don't try to falsify things by testing stuff. Nonsense. And then, how does it help try to show it's false? You want to try to connect it to see what you can do with this. What else do we know is it connected to? Quote 6, confirming evidence should not count except when it is a result of genuine test of a theory. This means that it can be presented as a serious but unsuccessful attempt to falsify the theory. I now speak in such cases of corroborating evidence, unquote. Nonsense. The totality of the evidence is what matters, not some stuff we want. Confirming evidence should count, but you got to know if it confirms and not mistake the evidence. Because here, partly his problem is not understanding induction, rejecting it, having these irrational ideas about that, having a problem with perception. No. Too caught up in the head, whatever. So when we have confirming evidence, it matters regardless. All the evidence matters. Metaphysically, nothing is more important than anything else. That's only for us in ethics or epistemology. Evidence always counts. Besides, in epistemology, the totality of the evidence matters, not just some stuff we want. But it's got to be evidence when you have to understand good logical reasoning and not be kind of iffy, sorty about it or have an improper view of confirmation or evidence. You don't know what evidence is, then there's going to be a problem. But that's a problem in someone's head and cognition and not knowing what evidence is. It's not the problem with science. Quote 7, some genuinely testable theories, when found to be false, are still upheld by their admirers. For example, by introducing ad hoc some auxiliary assumptions, or by reinterpreting the theory ad hoc in such a way that it escapes refutation. Such a procedure is always possible, but it rescues the theory from refutation only at the price of destroying or at least lowering its scientific status. I later described such a rescuing operation as a conventionalist twist or a conventionalist stratagem. Unquote. And those are the things he lists, and he says, quote, one can sum up all this by saying that the criterion of the scientific status of a theory is its falsifiability or refutability or testability, unquote. Nonsense. The scientific status of a theory is not if one can arbitrarily make something up, if there's something conceivable that can show it to be true. No. A theory has scientific status when it is connected to the evidence. There is actual evidence when you understand that term, confirmation evidence, not some arbitrary association between things like I'm pointing to a door. That's a bird. That is not evidence. That is lunacy or a lie or a mistake, but it is not evidence. A theory is connected to reality and to other things we know and can explain things. It's got good concepts, good inductions, connected in principles, by principles to like some underlying, or some like underlying in the sense of some metaphorical sense, but epistemologically it's this more abstract induction on these others. So we do some generalizations. We can generalize from those and generalize, get some things here, generalizations, generalize, get some generalizations here, generalize, and again, generalize across. And that's more like what's going on epistemologically. It's like more abstract. And so you could think of it as like underlying from a different perspective. But the scientific status of a theory is not that you can make something up. You know, the scientific status is that it's connected to reality and truth. It's not that you can make something up in your head, you know, stick your fingers in your ears, cover your eyes, cover your mouth, cover your nose, don't feel anything, get lost in your head, try to say no, make something up. No. Is it an awareness of reality? Is this some total integration of knowledge true in all its steps? Things like that make it have scientific status. Is there evidence in the proper sense of the term? Are inductions valid? Are concepts valid? Is the reasoning and the argument valid? Those are things, so it's more a matter of induction. It is not this falsifiability nonsense, which is so unhelpful. Scrolling down, but I'll read this last paragraph. Quote, thus, the problem which I tried to solve by proposing the criterion of falsifiability was neither a problem of meaningfulness or significance, nor a problem of truth or acceptability. It was a problem of drawing a line, as well as this can be done, between the statements or systems of thought of the empirical sciences and all other statements, whether they are of a religious or of a metaphysical character, or simply pseudoscientific, unquote. And by metaphysical, it's like, not in the sense of philosophy, but you go to the bookstore and you got metaphysics and it's about angels and witches and stuff like that. That's what he means, kind of like, quote, years later, it must have been in 1928 or 1929, I called this first problem of mine the problem of demarcation. The criterion of falsifiability is a solution to this problem of demarcation, for it says that statements or systems of statements, in order to be ranked as scientific, must be capable of conflicting with possible or conceivable observations, unquote. Nonsense. Not. Demarcation means something's connected to the truth, which these other things are not. So notice there's a lot of concepts that Popper is equivocating on, doesn't get, misunderstands, is conceiving of in a bad philosophical sense, doesn't have good epistemology, and so total fail. Falsifiability is false. So let's please, science, engineering, education, everyday life, dig into what logic and epistemology really are, get a good philosophy of science, and think about how we really know things and what the truth is. Popper having some mistakes and not knowing, how does induction work? Oh, I don't understand. I think it's wrong. It can't be right all the time. The problem is him and not figuring it out. Or a lot of people, it's not, I didn't figure it out. It's not an easy thing to figure out. Induction is very complicated. There's a lot of work that's been done on it more recently. More still is to be done. But the problem is with him and not figuring it out, not induction. Okay, because from some examples he gives, like, the alleged swan thing, which is enumeration, not induction. People can say, oh, here's a generalization that's wrong. Well, yeah, there's arguments that are wrong. That doesn't mean argument is bad. There's reasonings that are wrong. That's a problem with the person, not reasoning, just like it's a problem with the person, not argument as such. One can do deduction wrong. Just because deduction is finally understood from Aristotle and the rules are figured out doesn't mean that deduction is magically valid. It can be done wrong, and it is done wrong today. Just because rules of deduction have been figured out by Aristotle a long time ago, and we have syllogisms, and we can do things and argue. Clearly, you look at politics or a lot of the news, deduction and argument is not valid and true all the time. It is not automatically the case. So one can throw out deduction by some of the same things that one can throw out induction or any other like mental process. You feel something about something, then you learn that your feeling was like not really helpful or incorrect. So emotions are invalid. I mean, who the hell says that? People have the sense to know, sometimes my emotional response is right, and sometimes like it's off. When is it correct? What can I do to make my emotions better and be more consistent? Why is this emotion like, where did this come from? That's like making me feel like things that aren't really correct about this thing or that thing, People should do that for induction too. That's what Popper should have the sense to do instead of like dismissing it or throwing it out. But if we do that, think about what science really is, get rid of this falsifiability nonsense, know that science is about connecting to the truth, having good methods, being inductive, forming good concepts. If we dig into those things and know what they are, we're going to do science better, be able to teach it better. It'll help inform education, and people get an education to prepare themselves for adult lives. In this society, we need to know science, and regardless, to live as humans, we need to know how to identify the nature of things and cause-effect relationships to live well, because that's what we have to do to survive. We got to enact cause-effect relationships to get food, get shelter, get an iPhone, get a car, get a job and stuff. So we get this down better, we'll be able to apply it to all areas of thought in human life. Peace.